President Biden is taking his message of economic competition to the heart of the American steel industry in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. In front of an audience of union steelworkers, he said he'll urge the U.S. trade representative to consider tripling tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum. Those tariffs were initially imposed by former President Trump when he was in the White House. Senior advisor to the president, Gene Sperling, joins us now. Gene, always good to have a conversation with you.
Thank you.
Tell us, Gene, about this decision to focus now on trade and tariffs.
Well, what the president's focus has been from day one is an American manufacturing renaissance. And you've seen that through not just the infrastructure bill, but the incentives to build in America, make it in America. And that's why we have nearly 800,000 new manufacturing jobs and nearly double the investment in new factories. We've got to make sure we continue that manufacturing renaissance with new jobs. Now, the one thing that could hurt is if China were to essentially cheat in trying to raise their growth through exporting at artificially low prices at the expense of American workers. We've seen this in the past. We've had a strong record so far. The trade deficit, the goods trade deficit with China is down over 20%. It's lower than any year in the previous administration. But there is a fear. You've heard it from Janet Yellen. You hear it from many people. Secretary Janet Yellen, hear it from many people. China is trying to purposely create overcapacity, over-subsidization to lower prices. They think that even though those might be being sold at a loss, and they may think it's good for their economy, but it's only good by exporting at the expense of American workers. If they want to do that and with fair competition, bring it on. That's how the president feels. But he's sending a very strong message today in steel, aluminum, and shipbuilding that you can't cheat your way in exports and you can't do it at the expense of American workers. And Pennsylvania is a place that's been hurt by unfair trade for the last few decades, and he's making clear not on his watch.
Gene, let's step back for a moment here. You have been a veteran of Democratic politics, an advisor to American presidents across the board on serious economic issues. For many years in the Democratic Party, there was an almost aversion to tariffs as part of the arsenal when it came to an economic clash with China, as China grew its economy in the 90s and early 2000s. For tariffs to be revived, are we seeing almost a return to form for Democrats when it comes to economic policy and trade? Is this a shift back, or is it a shift forward? How do you see it as someone in the trenches of these issues?
You know, it's neither. It is dealing with economic reality. You know, you will not see this administration just for across-the-board tariffs that do no good for jobs and would just raise costs on American families on things they need. But when it comes to manufacturing, yes, this president is taking an aggressive stance. He believes and has shown that we can make it in America. You've seen just hundreds of billions of new investments, companies that are now making their manufacturing future in America, from steel to semiconductors to new types of autos that are more energy efficient. That is very important to this agenda. That is important to the president's view of manufacturing, to strong union jobs. And we are looking at reality right now. And what we're seeing is dramatic over-subsidization in China, overcapacity. And that's what a country might do when they're saying, hey, we would like to sell more goods, even if our companies are essentially selling them at a loss. We think will be good for our economy. So we'll subsidize them so they can sell them even if they couldn't make a profit on it. That is not an acceptable strategy when it is essentially an unfair trade practice in which they're trying to grow at the expense of putting American manufacturers and American workers out of the job. So So, I don't think you take these jobs or presidents come in and say, here's like an overall approach that we're going to take regardless of what the facts are. The president is dealing with the current situation in China with over-subsidization, trying to ensure his manufacturing agenda, his Made in America manufacturing agenda grows and is not set back due to unfair trade practices. So he's just dealing with the economic realities in the economy right now.
And just quickly, Gene, finally, you're being aggressive with this administration and taking on China now with tariffs. How is China going to respond? What's your real expectation of how the Chinese will handle this?
Well, I think, the president will be the first to say our goal is not a trade war. That's not our goal. That's not what we want. Our goal is honest, fair competition. When that happens, economies tend to, each company, each country has to be more on their game. They'll do more to innovate. So the president is not against fair competition. We believe that here in America, we are the most innovative, most competitive, have the best workers, the best union manufacturing workers. So it's not to, have a trade war, but it is sending a real economic reality to them in aluminum and steel and shipbuilding. And I think it's also sending a very strong overall message that this president is not going to sit back if other countries are seeking to play unfair at the expense of an American manufacturing renaissance that is already underway.
You say a strong message, not a trade war. We'll see what happens. Gene Sperling, we appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.